Welcome to Undressing Intimacy, where we cut through the bullshit
Greggy,
so we can get naked.
you can't say that.
Why not? How would you say it then?
Well, maybe more like, welcome to Undressing Intimacy, where we undress emotionally so we can undress physically.
That's exactly what I said. Not sure what the problem is. Welcome to episode
13.
You know, if we didn't have a daughter that was such a fan of Taylor Swift, we might be afraid of this episode. But since we do, we're going to grab onto this 13 episode and really go for it. How's that sound?
Sounds great. Lucky number 13.
I'm a little scared about this one.
Why?
For another reason. I'll tell you why. For my friends on YouTube, I had a little run-in with my razor beard trimmer guard. I don't know if Amy's even noticed it, but I got a little short on that side, see? And of course, it's the week I'm going to show my horse and look all pretty on top of my horse, and half my beard's gone on that side. So, yeah, I'm a little embarrassed about it, but we'll try.
It's just to keep that validation whore tendency
that's
down
right.
lower, just to
keep
you
my validation whore ass
in a humble space.
Yeah, that's right. All right, we had such the pleasure this week of going to dinner with some good friends. And these good friends happen to be also former clients of yours.
Yes.
That really went through a transformation. And the awesome part about doing this was it was a reminder of where we come from and the patterns that we'd been in and how awful those were. It was great to sit down and talk to them, and they reminisced a little bit of where they'd come from and some of the bad patterns, and it was a reminder for us too. And oftentimes when you talk about this, you think, oh man, that sucks. I wish I never had to go through that because it was awful.
Mm-hmm. It feels like your world is being pulled out from under you, right? Like if you're having marriage or relationship problems, it feels like now the whole of your life is, even if you've had great things in your family or work or in your health, they feel insignificant to the pain and suffering of the marriage.
For sure. And as we wouldn't go through looking for this, we've come to learn as we've taught ourselves and our clients that there's this pattern you have to go through, and part of it sucks.
Yes.
And if we don't go through this pattern, then we can't really grow and learn. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes a lot of the problems we have is we're trying so much to avoid the pain that we do things that cause extra pain. Or we often talk about emotions too. Like when we hold those emotions in and we don't deal with them, then they come out sideways. And we found in this process, when we tried so much to be avoidant of the pain and not deal with it, that it enlarges and becomes worse and we can't grow. So we want to talk about this week a little about this pattern so that everyone knows, hey, if you are going through some pain in this relationship, then you're probably on the right path and doing the right things. And if you're not, then you may be avoiding changing and growing and developing in a relationship. And so we want to talk a little bit about that.
Yes, especially since it's the holiday season and holidays bring out additional stress, whether that's financial, emotional, additional family dynamics and stress, additional pressure, additional activities, additional parties, additional events, additional food. There tends to be a lot of joyful things around the holidays, but also an increase of stress and anxiety and other stressors that can expose some of the challenges in a marriage. So first of all, I just want to say that the marriage relationship is meant to develop us as human beings. We often think about development in early childhood or as babies or even as adolescents, but really as adults, where we grow the most is in our marriages. That's where our mental and our emotional and our physical and our sexual development happens, all contained in this relationship. And often we think that when we get married, it's supposed to create happiness for us, but actually what it does is it creates stressors or maybe conflict or pressure, positive pressure to help us develop and grow. And so if your marriage is giving you some extra pressure or stress, you're probably ready to develop in a new way. And the way that this cycle in marriage goes is often a couple's in a state of harmony where things are going well, things are going smoothly, they're getting along, they like each other. And then there is some form of disharmony, a conflict, a disruption, a misunderstanding, a miscommunication. And this is all very, very, very normal. And what I see at this point is two different paths. The first path is to try and just keep the peace at all costs, instead of being honest, instead of confronting the difficulty, instead of facing more honesty. One spouse either accommodates or tries to keep the peace or goes quiet. And so things just kind of end or go underground. The conflict is never addressed. Another pattern that I see is the conflict happens and the couples just become very defensive, aggressive, combative, but they never move towards repair. And what I want to express today is that repair is actually what helps relationships grow stronger, grow more honest, what helps develop both of the spouses within the marriage relationship. And yet we often avoid that repair. And so whether you're peacekeeping and trying to stay quiet, which actually ends up eroding the relationship just as much as if you're aggressively attacking or turning that conflict into contempt. Contempt is very different than conflict. The answer for both of those sides is actually to move towards repair. That repair really does build the relationship. It's like fundamental to a relationship. So the pattern is to go from harmony to disharmony, some type of conflict to repair. And it's that last step that we're always missing.
Yeah, and I think we get stuck in either of those phases, right? You talked about the first one. You talked about you find people that are trying to be avoidant. I think that really is stuck in that phase of, I want this harmony so bad, I'm going to hide from anything that breaks it up, right? And that definitely is where we were at. Like we were hiding, lying, avoiding.
Well, I don't even think we saw it as lying.
I think there's sometimes we were. I think if we're going to be honest with ourselves, we would not say the truth to avoid any content or disharmony or anything that's like that, right?
Well, and I think we thought that was kind.
No, we were taught that's what we should do.
You should just always be nice, and you should make your other spouse happy, and you should just say the things that they want to hear to soothe their emotions or their egos.
I was told that was my job. Not only did we act that way because it's human nature, but I was raised to be said, hey, you're here to take care of this family and control this, and you will not add any of those other things. So you need to take care of yourself, and you can't show emotions. You can't do anything because you're the one to be the solid pole in this family, or it's going to crumble. And I brought this up in another podcast. I remember being in a church meeting with men, and we were talking about this, and I said, well, why don't you just tell your wife that that's how you feel? And I thought the pitchforks were going to come out and run me out of the building. Well, we couldn't do that. We couldn't do that because, they couldn't handle it. And I'm like, they gave birth. They're going to be just fine. Okay. And by the way, there was a friend afterwards that came talk to me. His wife was from Ukraine or one of those Eastern Bloc countries. She goes, oh, my wife is strong enough. If she can't handle herself, that's just ridiculous. And so it's something we've told ourselves that we can't do because our wives can't handle it. But in reality, I think it's hiding from it. We're taught about it. It's more scary to actually not avoid it and bring it up, but it never gets resolved if we don't get out of the phase. So we were solidly in the phase of avoidance.
Yes. Keep the peace, keep quiet, avoid conflict. And what happens then is it goes underground. It turns into resentment. That resentment really does erode your connection emotionally and physically and mentally. And that resentment will actually destroy your relationship.
Yeah, we spent years and years in this phase. And then I think we did jump to the second phase where we're like, this is not good. We talk about some of the explosions that happen in our marriage that force us in that. But even after that explosion, I think we went another hiding again. Like we had the explosive moment and we spent a lot of time hiding still after that, not knowing how to resolve it. But we had this edge of, hey, something's not right. This whole hiding thing's not working. And we had this, resentment come up, and we were actually be able to express it. But we still kind of got stuck in this, hey, I can say what it is, and I can say I'm discomforted and I'm not happy, but I can't really tell you how to get over that. I think we talk about listening to our favorite podcasts and putting our favorite podcaster in timeout because we used
her as a weapon.
Yes, absolutely. And that was
we
his
only
phase,
listened for what the other spouse was doing wrong, not to listen for ourselves and what our part in that pattern was.
Right. We weren't hiding anymore. We're out in full blown war.
Yeah, we were attacked. I guess we went from keeping the peace to full out attack. We went from one side to the other.
That's the next phase, right?
Yes.
And it took us a while on both of those, right?
And sometimes people go from attack to keeping the peace, right? They get tired of the attack and hurting each other. So then someone says, well, maybe it's just better if I go quiet.
Right. And that happened too, to a point where, we talked about being differentiated and being on each side of that scale, right? Where it's
enmeshed
and toxic. And independent.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when I finally came to realize all the damage and harm I was doing to you and what I needed to do to go be able to take care of myself, I went from battling that war of I'm going to fight to win. And I went to, I'm just going to give in and give anything. So I'm going to be independent. I'm not going to care. I'm not going to have emotions. If we have sex, it doesn't matter. If we do, that's great, but I'm just going to not care anymore. So I think I went back to hiding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And the problem with whether you're hiding from the conflict or whether you're aggressively attacking in the conflict is, again, that you never make it to repair. And if you don't make it to repair, then each conflict does become problematic.
So you're having all the pain, but you're not getting any benefit from it.
Right. It's like you're going to the gym to lift the weights, but then you're not actually growing any muscles.
Right. Like you're being sore and it hurts, but no muscles are being grown. It's like being pressured to make a diamond. That coal is being pushed and pushed and pushed. But at the last moment when it's about to be popped into a diamond, that hurts too much. So we give up.
Yeah.
And it usually is that. It's usually you can tolerate so much. And you can tolerate it and tolerate it and tolerate it. And then when you get to the point where really you're about to do the repair, it's too much and you pull back.
Get afraid, you get scared, you get worried. Maybe you start to protect or defend your own ego or your own wounds or your own hurts. We have a lot of different reasons for why we do it. But without the repair, then the conflict just pushes relationships into either a one up and one down where one has a voice and the other one's quiet and accommodating, or just this like roommate type relationship. You remove the ability to be intimate.
Right. You can't be close to each other because you're always in this constant battle, either fighting each other about something that really doesn't matter or actually hiding from each other. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't work out either.
Yep.
So tell us a little bit, Amy, you have some steps here that can help us in this repair. So we've talked about how difficult it is. And if you're in either of these phases, you're completely normal because you will be in them. And so tell us, what are the steps to once we get to repair? What do we do?
Yeah. So I really love how Terry Real, he is a renowned family therapist. He has a book called Us that is for married couples. And it talks about how to go from the me to the we. And that's really in that differentiation piece, right? Where there's room for both people, but also in the context of a relationship. And in his book, he gives these 4 steps of repair, and I have used them many different times in many different ways with clients and also between us. And so I thought I would share them to help you in this process. And so basically, the first 3 steps, a lot of couples do maybe a little more naturally, so they may not be as surprising or shocking. But the first 3 steps are to address your experience in that conflict. So the first one is to say, this is what I recollect happened. This is how I saw it. Again, using the I.
Why is that? That's important. That's different because I always like to say, well, this is what happened. And I stood on my stool and I stomped my feet. So you said a little different. What was the key word in that?
The key word is I, because 2 people in the very same situation, the very same conversation, the very same experience can have a very different recollection or mental or emotional or a different perspective on that same experience. And so it's important to own what you recollect that experience was.
Yeah, just learning that is a huge step. So you talk about come naturally to things. I think naturally we can say, hey, let's reconcile or think about what happened to us. We've talked in the past about our emotions and making sure we understand the circumstances are just facts, right? And this is also not only just laying out the facts, but also laying out the truth that this is how I perceive them. And it is a big deal because it changes the way we go about to the next step. If we can say, hey, I'm in a relationship with you and I care about that you can come to this relationship with a different perspective.
Yeah.
And until we can do that, then we can't really be differentiated because we don't really care about the other perspective. We care about being right.
Right.
I was really good about caring about being right. I'm competitive. I want to win. I want to be right.
And I think on the other end, I was afraid of being wrong.
Right.
And
That's true.
Yes.
I had never thought about that. Just the opposite. That fed into each other like perfectly.
Usually
Hand in
lock
glove.
and key, right? Hand in glove. And so of being afraid of being wrong, I was afraid to own that this was my experience. This is how I saw it. Because what if I wasn't right? Right.
And I never crossed my mind that I was right. Of course I was right.
Yeah. So I was coaching this couple last week, and the husband heard the wife say this word. I think it was sure or whatever, or something along those lines. And for him, when she said that, it had a whole paragraph of meanings. He heard and felt and brought up so many experiences from this one word. And from her side, she was simply just agreeing. So often there are two very different experiences in the same circumstance. And if you're making room for two people, you've got to make room for both of those experiences.
Yeah. No, I think even just us going into this, having this conversation, we realized how important this was and how differently we came about it. And that's what caused us not to go on, right? Was because I was going to be right because I knew I was right.
And I was afraid of being wrong.
Yeah. How beautiful is that to discover? Thank you for discovering it with us.
So first step, again, this is what I recollect happened. And then the second step, this is what I made it mean. Again, here's where you own your meanings. So back to the example I just gave, when the husband heard those words, to him it meant, well, if I have to. And to her, it meant, yes, I'm agreeing, right? Two very different meanings, which create very different feelings, which create very different behaviors. And if you can make room for that, like ownership, oh yeah, I made it mean this, which created this feeling in me, which created these behaviors, right? It's that ownership piece.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just give you an example that just happened this week, right? So out of the blue, Amy just started firing questions at me. And I kind of always go, what are you trying to get at? These questions are like, oh, what are your goals for the week? What do you hope to be and become? And what do you want to accomplish this week? And I'm like, uh-oh, something's coming at me. And so before I would have probably hidden or not said anything, but I was like, finally I was like, where did this come from? And she's like, oh, I've talked or read somewhere about doing weekly planning and setting goals and stuff. And I want to do that. So I'm like, okay, that's fine. And then a couple of days later, she's like, okay, you ready to go on this weekly planning thing? And I'm like, can you just ask me instead of trying to force me? She's like, I am. And I finally had to stop myself. I'm like, what is going on? And I had to say, yeah, I'm totally misunderstanding what she's trying to do here. I thought she was trying to force me to go do something or be this way. And I asked her to be collaborative, and I think she is, but it was meaning something completely different to me than it was meaning.
Yeah. And I was confused because I had asked you, hey, do you want to do this weekly check-in that, where we kind of sit around, talk about our goals and what's important, do some scheduling? And you were like, yeah, sure. So the next day I came back and said, hey, you want to do this weekly check-in now? And you were like, can you be collaborative?
So we'll use it. Let's use this example for our next one, because I don't think I've even told you, but I've realized what the next step will give you about this circumstance that I haven't even shared with you. So we'll unveil this live on
We're
the podcast.
doing it live. Okay. Again, this is what I recollect happened. This is what I made up about it. This is what I felt.
This is key, right? We've talked about this a lot, that our minds can fire off these warning signals that cause emotions in our body, right?
Mm-hmm. The amygdala sends those into your body.
Causes feelings. And oftentimes we don't realize what they are or recognize them. And so we don't deal with them. Mm-hmm. And then it just comes out sideways. So for this example, I definitely didn't deal with them. So when it first came to me, what it made me feel like was, I hate planning. And the reason why I hate planning is because the only good thing about planning is I fail, right? So if I put it on paper and I put it down and I plan to do it and I set a goal, like when I made the goal, woohoo, so what? I made the goal. But there's a lot more meaning to me when I fail. And it puts that out to make me fail. So the emotion that I was feeling and didn't understand or capture or share with you was, I don't want to do this because all it will mean is I will fail to reach my goal at the end of the week and I'll just feel terrible about myself. So why even set the goal in the first place?
Oh, wow. And here we are. One of the things that we did in that weekly planning meeting was to make a podcast time. And yet here you are succeeding.
I am. So see, I'm not right about the way I'm feeling. And that's when I could come back and say, okay, let's still do this planning thing, because it took me a little while. I even addressed it at saying, hey, can we talk about this? Can we collaborate? And Amy was like confused. And then I sat and thought about it for a while. I'm like, well, that's not right. So it did take me the time to sit down and go like, what is really going on here? Because this whole thing's not jiving. Like, we're not connecting in a certain way. We seem to be two different planets. There's something else going on. And let me tell you, this is not how this used to happen. Right? We would have been in a fight. I would have pouted, maybe argued. I don't know what I'm doing, but I would have been like, I'm never doing this damn planning meeting in the whole entire world. And I may not even have said that, but I would have just like not shown up. And I would have never got to a point where I thought, what the hell is going on? Like, what is going on? And it really took me that step of, this is what I felt. Because even when I acknowledged what I made about it, it was not until I really dug in, because I acknowledged, okay, I'm making this mean something bigger than it is. It's meaning that we're not connecting. It's meaning something. But until I dug into that feeling and saying, what are the feelings around this? Did I really get to the root cause of why I was being so avoidant to have this planning meeting?
And I think on my part, what happened differently is I recognized something was going on for you. It didn't really add up. Like, you had two conflicting behaviors. So I recognized that you were in conflict. And I thought, okay, I'm going to give him space and let him decide. I'm not going to pressure him and push him. I actually love planning.
Talk about we fit in each other hand in glove. Like, she would put everything on the calendar.
Excites me. I see the progress. I see the possibility.
Miss checkbox.
I see potential. I get excited. And so I recognized he was having a different experience and said,
maybe I should use it to get you excited. I'm not using it to my advantage.
And I said, you know what? It's totally fine. Whatever works for you. I'd love to be able to plan some time for our podcast.
You gave me the space to go figure it out.
Yeah.
Yep. And that's important as a couple, is to give each other space. But we were battling. And I bring this up too, because that was this week, right? So we've learned this pattern. We've coached couples on this pattern. We've practiced it for years now, and we still mess it up.
Well, I don't think we mess it up. I think what is more important to see is that even if you know patterns and know how to work in a relationship, you're still going to have conflict.
Right. Oh, hey, yeah. We have to go through this.
We have to have conflict. And so it's okay. And I think even going through that this week, I thought, okay, something's going on for him. I'm going to give him some space, let him work through this. I didn't make it mean you didn't like me. I didn't make it mean you didn't want to be married to me. I didn't make it mean you didn't want to do the podcast. I saw that there was conflict going on for you and allowed that to happen. And I had faith you would come back.
Those are all the things you would have thought in the past, though.
Yes.
Yep.
So I don't think it's so much about I would say that this is a necessary part of marriage.
Yeah. No, it's a necessary pattern. You're right. And I guess why I'm saying that is that even though you practice it and get good at it, you still have to go through it. And it's a necessary pattern. It gets easier. You have tools to deal with it. And maybe sometimes the really big things come and it's not easier. It's still painful, but we recognize it and we have a lot of different reactions than we had in the past around it. But these things still come up in our marriage all the time.
Yes. So the fourth and final step that I think is crucial, that is the one that most couples, ourselves included, really missed, is, and this is what repair would look like. This is what would help heal. This is what would help resolve this. This is what would help work through this. You make it possible for your spouse to be forgiven, to work through this, to develop. You make it possible for yourself to develop, to heal. You make it possible for more honesty to be on the table about your relationship. You make it possible for there to be more trust and truth. For example, sometimes repair is from the side of the person who has caused the conflict or the rupture. And when they are saying, I see that this thought and this feeling and this meaning caused me to behave in this way, and that I need to develop past this. I need to grow up. This is a very childish or regressive or defensive or avoidant pattern. And I am committing to growing up or to changing this or to doing better or to develop my thinking and my behaviors. That is when you really develop a lot more trust and connection in relationship.
And it's sexy too.
Yeah, it's so sexy. It's attractive. You want to talk about creating intimacy, talk about owning what you do that's negatively impacting a relationship. That's sexy.
Why you went after me the other night, huh? Hold on, I'm taking some notes here. Yeah, it literally becomes a pattern of trust and adult ownership, right? It's like owning your own stuff is so important, and it's so hard. It's still hard for me to do. It's becoming easier, but it really is hard for me to do, to say, this is me, and this is what I did to play into this. And it happens in all parts of your life. I'm just thinking about work this morning. We had a big escalation that didn't need to be an escalation. And I was like, this is crazy. And I was angry, and I started firing off IMs to people. There was a part of it that I played into it, right? And until I took ownership of that, we couldn't resolve it. And I think it's in all parts. So it will be your work life. It will be with your kids. It will be with your spouses and all the human relationships. If we can stop and understand the part we played in it, then that is so important. It leads to that healing, right?
Yes. And I think, so that's the repair from the side of maybe you're the one that was more responsible for the rupture. But on the other side, maybe from the one who's on the receiving end, and sometimes it's mutual, but sometimes it really is someone has done or said something that is hurtful or has had a negative impact. From the other side, I see a lot of spouses try and punish and try and become judgmental or very critical or controlling then of their spouse. And instead, this repair says, I see that it's important we work together. I want to make it possible for us to repair. It might sound like, I really want to hear what you're saying, but when you're screaming at me, it doesn't get through. Can you lower your voice? Or it really is hard when you say you're going to be home at 5:30 and then you don't come home till 8 and I don't hear anything. It's hard on me. It's hard on the kids. I would really like for you to be able to communicate that to me. And so I'm not sitting at the dinner table with the kids waiting for you and they're wondering where you are. Can you please let me know? Can you keep me in the loop, right? You're making it possible to build that bridge and not just make the other person the villain, right? And yourself the victim. Like you're making it possible to heal and develop and work through.
It's so easy to do that. And I often find ourselves even taking a moral stand sometimes in that direction, right? Like I'm morally right. I know that I'm right because of this, this, and this, and that you need to change and fix this. And there could be some honesty and truth of this. Like that person could have done the thing that caused the pain and suffering. But whenever we take a moral high road or high ground, we never give space for them to be able to reach up, and repair. And oftentimes when we're doing that, we're actually not looking at what we played into it too, right? There's very, very, very rarely that only one person played into the situation that caused the hurt, pain, or suffering. We find that all the time with our clients. That's why we like to work with couples themselves, right? And not just individuals, because when you work with just an individual, you get all the things that they see and their perspective, but you don't get the true picture, what usually lies between the middle of the two of them, and can help them see that. But absolutely on this side of it, if you are the one that needs to step and give space and some forgiveness, that's just as important as seeing what you played into it and being able to admit that you were part of causing the problem.
I've seen couples really hold very critical or harsh judgments or resentments against another spouse, and they use that all of the time to criticize them, to push them down, to make them feel less than, and that is cruel.
Right. Now, I've been in the middle of coaching session and talking through this and thinking we're making space and doing it to it, and then I'll have a spouse go back to that one moment where they were harmed, and it was a legitimate harm, right? And this spouse did something that was legitimately wrong, and they'll play that card. And then what does that do? It literally shuts the other spouse down.
There's never a repair.
Yeah. And that spouse has literally said, well, there's the trump card. I can't do anything with that, right? It's like playing the prophet card when you pull that out, right? Or the God card or the Jesus card. What do I play next? There's nothing to play. And so you've totally shut it down.
You haven't made it possible to be a team, to be a we, to repair. You keep just shutting that spouse out and down.
And here we are making room and moving towards a place I think we can repair. And it's the fear, I think, is the number one thing that causes that person to go, oh my gosh, this is uncomfortable. This is uncomfortable. I'm going to play my trump card. Boom. And they play it, and that shuts it down. I
mean, I think I did that at the beginning with you in regards to pornography.
Oh, absolutely.
And I see how unkind it was and how it kept us stuck.
Yeah.
Neither of us could heal. I couldn't heal, nor could you, when that was constantly the move, right? Because there was no room to repair. And if you can't repair, we couldn't rebuild our trust. We couldn't rebuild our intimacy. We couldn't rebuild our connection. Like, it is the dam that stops all of that.
Well, it was because I knew that I had morally done something wrong, and that I had, and now really the moral problem was the lying to you and not being honest. But I knew I'd done that. So I'm not going to be anywhere near open and honest with you, because if I go there, I didn't feel like I had any firm footing to stand on, right?
And yet the more honesty you brought to the table, the more healing. That was the repair.
But I couldn't do it until I was given space to be able to have firm footing to stand on, to know that, yes, we do make mistakes. We cause pain and suffering, and there's even moral issues that we do that are bad. But if we're truly in a relationship where we want to stay and repair it, then we've got to allow that spouse to have space to be able to stand on firm ground and be open as honest. And you're right. As soon as you were allowed to see that and get past that moral high ground, it did allow me to be able to be more open and honest and start us on the road of repair.
Mm-hmm. It's helping each other win, right? I make mistakes, you make mistakes. If we're more invested in the repair than we are the judgment and criticism and blame of the mistakes, then we're going to develop individually and together.
And I'm just silly stupid that way, right? Because I just want to win at all costs. I do iRacing with my sons, right? And the problem with iRacing is that it's not who wins first. It's you also can't wreck other people in your car too, because you get these wrecking points. And I am so aggressive on this thing that I can be in first place, but don't care, or I'll be in second place, and I could actually get second place and get all these low iRating points and I don't care. I'll go wreck someone just because they wronged me. And so I am terrible at this thing, and I always want to win. So it was very difficult for me to be able to say winning is not the goal as an individual. Winning as a couple is a goal. And if I didn't leave space to be wrong, and I didn't leave space to collaborate with Amy, then we weren't going to win as a couple. Mm-hmm. I might have victories individually and say, see, I was right. I told you so. But that didn't do us any good as a couple.
And I think part of the difficulty of seeing an error, a mistake, seeing that you were wrong is if your identity is wrapped up around being perfect or being seen as good enough, or if you're insecure about yourself, then when you see these like viable mistakes, you can move into a place of self-pity and attacking yourself. And that's not helpful. So to be able to self-confront, to take ownership, and also hold on to your value and your worth, and see that failures are really a part of learning. And you can't learn without making mistakes. That doesn't mean I'm justifying intentionally going out to make mistakes, but it's being able to take ownership of what didn't go well, what didn't work out, what was childish of me, where I was short-sighted or blind, in some way.
Yeah, another good example of this, I had a recent coaching call with a higher desire person, and they were telling me how they had an experience where they allowed their lower desire spouse to just roll over next to them, hold them, and they had this wonderful sex, great lovemaking experience, and how wonderful that was. And I'm like, woohoo, and we're marking it down and celebrating. He's like, yeah, but the next day when I'd spent a lot of time with my spouse and I was really, really attracted to them and I really wanted to be with them and I had this great sexual desire, I tried to initiate it and it didn't go so well. He's like, that's not even fair. Like, how come that they can initiate it whenever they want and it's great, but if I try to initiate it, then it's sucky. And again, it was stuck in that pattern of winning. And I'm like, well, who cares who initiates it? You got laid, right? And yeah, I did. And it was great. Well, did you collaborate and ask and talk about how you had all these feelings and want to do it? No, I just initiated it. Well, maybe you should collaborate a little more. So anyway, not getting into that, but I wanted to show another example of if you're focused on, hey, it's not fair. If you're saying that to yourself, then you're probably not in a place. Yeah, you're a victim. You're not in a place of repair, right? If that's coming to your mind, this is not fair. You're not in a place of repair.
Mm-hmm. Yep. We like to make one spouse the villain and one the victim. And if you can see where you're putting yourself in either category and take ownership of it, it will bring you back to actually your true center.
Yep. All right, let's go back through this.
Okay.
So first thing we have to do is we have to realize that something happened.
Yep.
And we got to reflect on what was it happened. What's the circumstance? What just happened?
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about a key word in that is what I recollect, right?
Yes.
What happened for me.
This is my experience of this situation or circumstance.
Making room for two different experiences.
Because I can guarantee you they will be different. I've coached 100,000 couples, and every time the story of what happened is different from each spouse.
Right. And we just talked about it in this podcast.
Yep.
Things that our own lives that just recently happened that we saw how different we are. Second, we need to know what we met that meaning be for us.
What that meaning was, what that story was, what you made it mean. Taking ownership again. If you made it mean that you're not enough, or if you made it mean that you were being attacked, or if you made it mean that you were unworthy or undesirable, that's your meaning.
Right.
You have to know and take ownership of that.
And then the critical next step, which I think is really important, because you can understand the meaning, but until you decide what it felt for you, like I told you, until I really decided, what is this making me feel like? Why am I having this reaction? It's because I'm worried about failure. That was the real fear that we talked about. Until I did that, really, I could not head to the last step, which is...
And just one little side note there. Remember, it is our thoughts and feelings that create all of our behaviors.
Yes.
And so recognizing your feelings and the meanings, or your thoughts or beliefs, whatever you want to call them, that is where you choose to behave and act from. That is the place that you make your choices from. And so recognizing those not only helps the relationship get more honest, but it helps you get more honest with yourself, because you have all the capacity to update thoughts or beliefs or meanings that are incorrect, or that are from the past, or that are not fully true.
Yep. And I think the last step is really important, because we talk about repair, but I like how he puts it. He says, this would help me feel better. So you've taken ownership of what it is, what you're feeling, and ownership of how you can feel better about that, not placing it on your spouse of, you need to make me feel better. But these are the things that I could do to help me make me feel better. So I'm an example. I realized that I didn't want to fail. And I came back to Amy and said, you know what, let's go plan, because I realized that if we can do this and I'm successful, that I will overcome this fear of planning, and this will help me feel better. And so again, it's going to repair, but also taking ownership in that repair too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And what you're really doing, again, is creating that possibility to rebuild trust, rebuild connection, create more honesty, create more intimacy. And this is what you don't get when you take the avoidance or the accommodation path. When you pretend that everything's okay and just brush it under the rug, or when you make the conflict very much a personal attack or full of contempt. conflict and contempt are two very different things. And so when it becomes a personal attack, that is contempt. Conflict is just we have a difference of opinion or a difference of understanding or a different meaning, maybe a different goal. And it's an opportunity to actually build the relationship.
Yeah. So we hope that you'll go back and take some inventory of your life and your relationship with your significant other, your spouse, and realize where you're at. Are you avoidant? Are you trying not to have conflict, and so you're doing everything you can to avoid it? Are you in an all-out battle and war, trying to win and making sure that you come out
or trying
victor,
not to be wrong,
or trying not to be wrong
and
on the other
hiding
side and hiding from it? Mm-hmm. Where are you at? And then identify these places that you can actually do some repair.
What would repair look like? What could repair be like? Just even adding on that thought can probably help move your conflict forward.
And we would love to help you no matter where you're at in these phases. Even just like I said, visiting our friends at dinner and having them, we call them our graduates, right? We usually don't come.
We have several graduates
with coaching clients until we're not actively coaching them anymore, and we actually have graduates. And even them, talking to them again and reminding them of this pattern.
Yeah. And they're like, yeah, we go through this pattern, but we go through it faster and we don't get stuck. Whereas before they were really at the verge of divorce, on the edge of their marriage. Yep. And now they feel like they've created a new us. And we have several couples that have had this experience.
Yeah, it's been really fun.
Created their new relationship. And some of them have even commemorated it in a special way with a ceremony or a new ring or something like that. But they really do feel like they've rebuilt their relationship, which is what it's all about. We are supposed to be constantly building and rebuilding our marriage. And that is actually the sign of a very healthy marriage.
So no matter where you're at, if you need some help, please come visit us on langfordlifecoaching.com. We have a free consult button up there. Click that. You can choose either me or my beautiful spouse, Amy. I won't be offended because you'll probably choose Amy because she's amazing. I get the leftover drudges.
You do not.
And we would love to talk to you.
Yes, we would. We would love to help walk you through this process, help show you what you might be thinking that needs to be updated, show you where you might be creating accommodation or avoidance or becoming the victim, and also helping you understand how to process your feelings, how to metabolize through them, and ultimately create that repair.
Yep. I can't tell you all how much I've enjoyed sitting behind this mic, more than I ever expected to.
It's fun.
What a fun process. Hey, we just learned about something new about ourselves today in front of everybody. And today we got an email out of the blue, just a surprise. One of you listeners out there, kudos to you reaching out to us, actually said, hey, I love listening to you. It's great. And that just inspires us to keep going.
Yeah, he said he feels like he knows us. And I hope that's the feeling that all of you get, that we have brought you into a private conversation, or we're out to dinner together, or we're meeting in an appropriately intimate setting where you can open your hearts and we open our hearts, and there's that sharing and that learning and that growth together.
I mean, I even exposed my razor incident with you, also. It's pretty intimate, right? I'm getting down to the nitty-gritty.
I don't think you can really see it on camera.
Oh, good. Maybe. I hope they won't be able to see it on the back of a horse. All right. We love it. Thank you so much for joining us. Go like and subscribe. And until next week,
keep undressing your intimacy.
She got it right. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.